So, have you ever read about the Dyatlov Pass incident? It's that eerie case from 1,959 inches, the Russian Ural Mountains, 9 hikers went missing, and what rescuers found is still baffling people today.
Yeah, that story gives me chills every time. The hikers were all experienced, but somehow their winter trek ended in one of the most puzzling disasters in outdoor history. I remember reading that when the group's tent was finally discovered, it had been slashed open from the inside.
Exactly. And the fact that they fled into the freezing night without shoes or proper clothing just amps up the weirdness. I think what fascinates so many people is how every clue seems to raise more questions than it answers.
And it's not just the circumstances. The official investigation closing the case as the result of a compelling natural force was so vague. That left the public totally unsatisfied, and honestly, it keeps the debate alive even today.
Let's try to unpack what we do know about those days leading up to the tragedy. The group was last seen alive on February 1st, heading toward Otorten Mountain. After that, everything gets murky fast.
Well, their last camp was set up on the slopes of what's now called Dyatlov Pass. What gets me is they chose a pretty exposed spot to pitch their tent. Some think it was to practice for harsher conditions. Others wonder if they got lost in the storm.
And according to diaries and cameras recovered, spirits were still pretty high that evening. There was even a snapshot of them joking around barely hours before disaster struck. I can't help but wonder what really happened after nightfall.
Honestly, it's haunting to go from laughter to tragedy so quickly. The rescue teams found footprints leading away from the tent, single file, as if they weren't even running. That's what's so strange. There was panic, but also this sense of eerie order.
That actually leads us right into the theories. Avalanche is the mainstream explanation, but does it really fit the evidence? Some experts argue the snow wasn't deep enough, and the way the bodies were found just doesn't line up.
I get that skepticism. Plus, some of the hikers had severe internal injuries like broken ribs and skull fractures, but hardly any external wounds. That's why some folks point to military experiments, secret weapons testing, or even infrasound as possible causes.
It's wild how many layers there are. Then you've got the more out there ideas, UFOs, Yeti attacks, fueled by traces of radiation on some of the clothing. I mean, the official files didn't help much by being so heavily redacted.
And the fact that the area was closed off soon after, that definitely fed into the idea that something was being covered up. But with each new theory, the mystery only deepens instead of clearing up. It's almost like the case was made to remain unsolved.
Funny, you mention those details, it makes me think about the hikers themselves. They weren't amateurs. Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader, was known for his meticulous planning. The others were seasoned outdoor enthusiasts, mostly students or recent grads.
That's what gets overlooked a lot. These weren't people who would just panic over a snowstorm. Each person brought a specific skill: navigation, first aid, engineering. Even their journals show how prepared and close-knit they were.
And let's not forget, there was an extra hiker, Yuri Yudin, who turned back early due to illness. He was the only survivor. Imagine the survivor's guilt. He spent his life searching for answers, but never found closure.
That detail about Yuri still hits me. The way he described his friends and their routines really humanizes the story. It's not just a puzzle. It's about real people whose lives were cut short in such a bizarre way.
What surprised me most is how even after decades, new information keeps surfacing. For example, there were traces of orange, skin, and gray hair on some victims, and a few had missing tongues or eyes. It's almost too strange.
Some of that's probably due to decomposition, but the timing and placement just add to the confusion. And then there's the bit about the tent being cut from the inside. What would scare a whole group so badly they'd do that in sub-zero temps?
Exactly. And with all the missing or contradictory autopsy reports, it's like the harder you look, the more the facts blur. Even modern attempts to reinvestigate, like the 2019 official review, haven't really put doubts to rest.
It almost feels like every answer breeds another question. The Dyatlov Pass feels less like a solvable puzzle and more like a mirror for our own fears and fascination with the unknown.
After all this time, I think the Dyatlov Pass endures because it's the perfect storm of fact, myth, and unanswered questions. There's just enough evidence to keep us guessing, not enough to ever truly settle the debate.
And the story keeps getting retold through documentaries, podcasts, movies. It almost takes on a life of its own. I think people are drawn in partly because we all want to solve the unsolvable, and partly because it taps into our deepest fears about nature, trust, and the limits of knowledge.
It's fascinating how the mystery has inspired everything from research expeditions to wild conspiracy theories. And yet, every time we revisit, we come away with more questions than answers.
Maybe that's what makes it so powerful. The Dyatlov Pass isn't just a cold case. It's a reminder that some stories will always resist neat explanations. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real reason we can't let it go.